Hello, everyone. Hey, guys. Thanks for making your way down. I'm Jazz. I'm from Ren Labs, and today I'll be talking to you. Yes, one fan. A bit about our learnings over the years working at Ren and our shift from the protocol side to the application side. We'll be going through some user experience things that we've learned, specifically with regards to cross-chain. Yeah, let's get started. And before we start, actually, can we get a quick show of hands as to who has used a cross-chain application before? Okay, cool. And keep your hands raised if the experience you had while using that application is seamless, to the point where you'd recommend it to your retail friends to use and wouldn't have to. Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah, so let's get started. I think these points might be useful for some of you guys, hopefully. Sorry, I forgot I had to press the button. So we'll start with a brief history lesson on the internet. Very brief.
I'm sorry, what is the internet?
Yes. So in the early days, back in the around the 60s, I think the internet was primarily used for military purposes. There were a bunch of fragmented networks, all disconnected. They communicated from point A to point B, but there wasn't much intercommunication between them. So this was before the internet was called the internet. That changed when TCP/IP was introduced, communications protocol, about a decade or so later, which all of these networks had to conform to in order to interoperate. And this really opened the internet up to all kinds of use cases that we see today. And we're at a similar sort of place with blockchains up until recently. We see Bitcoin, Ethereum, Avalanche, all of these independent blockchains up until recently had no real communication between them. And over the last couple of years, we've started seeing some approaches that are trying to fix this. So different kinds of solutions. Some are, cross-chain messaging services. Others at Ren, we have kind of like a central hub, which connects to all of these blockchains and brings them all together. There are approaches like IBC, which is like a protocol standard that all of these blockchains have to conform to. They all have their trade-offs, but they also all have pretty similar user experience when you interact with them. So we'll just go over a simple example of trading two assets, Bitcoin and GMT. So Bitcoin, obviously on the Bitcoin blockchain. GMT is Steppen, so that's on Solana. So the current user experience, step one, you send Bitcoin to an address. Step two, receive GMT on Solana. I wish. There are a few steps missing here. So let's break that down a bit. So first, you need to traverse the internet to find a bridge that has this pair. I think it'd be unlikely to even find a bridge that has this pair, so you might need to split it up into multiple trades. But for the purposes of this example, let's assume such a pair exists. Next step, you send the Bitcoin to an address that's given by the cross-chain protocol, and then you have to wait for some amount of confirmations. In the case of Bitcoin, that's usually 6 confirmations, which is like 10 minutes each, so an hour or so. Twiddle your thumbs for a bit. And then you make sure you have a Solana wallet, because some of these cross-chain applications require you to submit a transaction on the receiving blockchain in order to receive your asset. If you don't, you install one. And then you make sure you have enough Solana for gas. Even though the trade you're doing doesn't involve Solana, you need to have Sol in your wallet, which is convenient. If you don't, you fund your Solana address from another account. Maybe you have to go to a centralized exchange to convert some fiat into Solana. Most important step, pray to the cross-chain gods that everything works as expected. And that's about it. Then you receive your GMT on Solana, if you're lucky.
I thought it was the DeFi gods.
DeFi gods, cross-chain gods, there are a fair few gods in our space, Vitalik. So some of the pain points in that process, let's go through them. You might have noticed a few as we were going through. So the first one is the user needs multiple wallets generally when they're doing cross-chain trading, cross-chain anything really. This was a screenshot of my browser. Don't ask why I have Terra Explorer still. But yeah, it's not great for new users when they have to, you're showing them an application and they have to first go to the Google Web Store or use a different browser to install a new wallet. It's overall not great. Next pain point is gas. This is kind of self-explanatory. Everyone has spoken about this already today, I'm sure, in the user experience talks. So the two problems with gas are, or the main problem is that you have to interact with an asset that you might not even be wanting to deal with. So Solana in the example. And that's even worse in the cross-chain space when there are a bunch of different native chains you're dealing with.
When was this transaction attempted?
This was some NFT drop, I think.
It costed more to receive
Yeah,
Ether?
questionable choice. And then we have confirmations. As mentioned, you usually have to wait for some amount of time before you receive your assets. And there are some ways you can improve this, which we'll get into a bit later. Then there's the onboarding process. So how does a user get Bitcoin or whatever asset they want to play with into their wallet? So there's a fiat aspect of onboarding, but then there's also the onboarding of new concepts. So things like impermanent loss or liquidity pools or AMMs, these kinds of concepts. A user generally has to get a good idea of what they mean so they don't lose money. And then lastly, we have the concept of fragmentation. So this is also kind of broken up into two different parts. There's the liquidity aspect. So liquidity can be fragmented across a bunch of different blockchains. For example, at Ren, we support Bitcoin. And with every new layer 1 that we support, we need to deploy a wrapped representation of this Bitcoin on that chain. So that means you have a new pool suddenly for this chain that might be drawing liquidity away from the other pools. You need to provide incentives for this pool to get people to use it so that there's sufficient liquidity. And overall, it's not really sustainable the more chains you support. And then the second component of fragmentation is just generally fragmentation of action. So you usually have to interact with a bunch of different applications. You have to jump through certain hoops in order to do what you're doing. So it's not usually the case that you can do all your tasks from one spot. So how can we fix this? So I'll give you a quick overview of how Catalog works, which is a DEX we're working on, which is built on top of the Ren protocol. So Ren itself is a layer 1 blockchain, and in the coming months we'll be introducing support for EVM, so you can deploy your applications that are already on Ethereum and other blockchains onto the Ren protocol itself. And the nice thing about doing that is you immediately get access to all of the assets that Ren supports. So inside your smart contracts, you can imagine you can suddenly interact with Bitcoin and these sorts of assets. So Catalog is the first application, first example of an application being deployed onto the Ren layer 1. And it's a decentralized exchange with a few key features. The first of which being it has a single wallet. One of our key values, I guess, at Catalog is to have sorry, wrong slide. Is to replicate sort of the centralized exchange experience. So the way the Catalog wallet works is a user deposits funds into their account, and they can do their trading, they can do lending, whatever they want, and then they can withdraw their funds once they're done. So kind of dissimilar to Uniswap and traditional DEXs, more like a centralized exchange experience, but the difference being it's all trustless. So with Catalog, you can deposit your Bitcoin, Ethereum, all sorts of assets, and then have them all in the same place. Secondly, we abstract all of the gas costs away for the user. So this gets abstracted. So the Catalog wallet that I was just referring to, the user interacts with it using their Web3 signature. So any wallet that they currently use, whether it's MetaMask or Trust or something else, they can use that to control their Catalog account. So they just have to sign messages in order to trade or to do any sort of actions using their funds inside Catalog. So what that means is they don't have to pay gas. They don't have to deal with any sort of new assets that are irrelevant. They don't have to pay additional gas fees. That just gets abstracted away. Either the protocol pays those fees and they get deferred to the protocol, it gets subsidized by the fees that the protocol is earning, or it gets hidden away into the price of the assets you're receiving. Thirdly, we have reduced confirmations. So instead of having to wait 6 confirmations for a trade that might only be a $10 Bitcoin trade, you can just wait for 1 or 2 confirmations and be pretty confident that the user isn't trying to do a double spend, because if they were, I think they'd be trying to go for a bit more than that. And generally, you can cap this amount that your reducing confirmations for at the block reward for the blockchain. So Ethereum, you might have a reward for mining a block, and you can cap this amount at that amount. Or you can cap the amount that they can trade with reduced confirmations at that block reward. So it's actually, if they're receiving more by mining a block, then they'll just go do that instead of double spending on your exchange. And then fourth, we have a fiat on-ramp, which is a simple way for the user to onboard Bitcoin and other sorts of assets into their catalog account. We use Bankster for this service. It's pretty nice. The user, they have to KYC to use it, but there's no reason not to let the user go through that process if they want to get some funds into their catalog account, instead of having to leave the exchange to go to a different sort of service. And then finally, we extend liquidity from all of the different blockchains. So one thing we do at Catalog is we don't try and recreate any liquidity pools that already exist on other chains. For example, if there's an ETH to APE pool that exists on Uniswap, on Ethereum, and that has all the liquidity, we won't try and recreate a ETH to APE pool on Catalog. It doesn't make sense to try and pull liquidity away from other pools that are already doing their job. Instead, what we do is we have a concept of cross-chain liquidity pools inside Catalog. So these are pools like BTC to ETH, or BTC to AVAX, BTC to Sol, the kinds of pairs that you don't see on native DEXs. And we use them combined with DEX pools that are on other exchanges to allow for some pretty cool trades. So a user could go from BTC to APE, and all they have to do is send their Bitcoin to Catalog. They have to deposit it, submit a trade, and Catalog will break that up into two components, into the Catalog side, so the side of the trade that's being executed on Catalog, and the portion of the trade being executed on Uniswap. And this is made possible by Catalog being deployed on RenVM, because it allows Catalog to guarantee that the trade either gets fully executed or not executed at all. So Catalog can execute the second side of the trade, which is, in this case, DAI to Ethereum, on Uniswap, and wait for that to be confirmed before doing the BTC to ETH side on Catalog. So the user's not stuck with any kind of middle asset in between. And then finally, we have an exclusive access form for you guys. If you want to, you can fill that out. You may or may not get access to Catalog. We'll be launching in the next few months, so keep an eye on that. And then we'll have, hopefully we can get some feedback from you all and inspire some other projects to take some of these UX concerns in cross-chain pretty seriously. Yeah. That's about it. Thank you, guys. Yes.
Permission settings are wrong.
Okay, maybe take a photo of that for now, and we'll get my man in the corner to fix that up. It's actually my fault, but I'm going to blame it on him. Any other? Yes?
So we doing... Can I? All right, thank you. How do you guarantee the security? How do you guarantee the security with so little? So we had this chart with 2 bars and 5 bars or 6. So
yeah.
How do you guarantee the security this way?
Yeah, so maybe I didn't explain this too well. So if a user is doing a trade that's 100 Bitcoin, they want to convert that to APE or whatever, then you will wait for the full confirmations. If there's only one trade happening throughout the Catalog network, there's only a single trade, and it's for a small amount, then you can sort of reduce the amount of confirmations you wait for. Additionally, that's one thing you could do. You can also offload that risk to someone else who's willing to take on that risk, and they can get a fee for the trade. So if they're happy to wait for 4 confirmations instead of 6, they can do that. They can take on the last 2 confirmation risk themselves, and then they can get paid for that.
Thank you.
Do you issue your own synthetic assets? Do you issue your own synthetic assets, or you use other synthetic assets?
We leverage the assets that are deployed on RenVM, so Ren native assets. Catalog doesn't have its own synthetic assets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask, if I'm going between, say, Optimism and Arbitrum, is that a potential use case where I can use this?
Yep.
Then do I have to, what's the sort of the trust profile there? Do I have to trust something, or is it a trustless solution, or what does that look like?
You have to trust that RenVM is trustless. there is a trust in a decentralized network that we've been running for the last 5 years. It's a cross-chain network. And that's about it. You can have a look at the contracts on either chain that will be interacted with in the process. But that's about the level of trust you need to have. There's no single entity that you need to trust throughout.
So I haven't been following up with the REN project that much, but like maybe 6 or 9 months ago when I checked, your node was still not open source. It was kind of gray sourced, or portions of it was open source. Are you guys going to open source the entire project before you release this?
Yes, we are. So we have a roadmap that'll be released as soon as we're back from this trip, which will include timelines for things like open sourcing. The reason we haven't been completely open source, so contracts and things are open source, the node itself hasn't been. That's for security reasons, which I think, in my opinion, has paid dividends, given we haven't been hacked, probably the one of few cross-chain protocols that hasn't. But you're right, that will be open source before the release, yeah.
That's because you guys were running a lot of MPC computations that I guess you guys were not 100% sure about it?
So,
Buying some time, right?
yeah, so two reasons. One was just closed source. One was because the MPC protocol that we had developed in-house was our own, and we didn't want projects to be just ripping that and claiming it as our own. But I think we've sort of passed that now, so we're happy to release that to the public.
Two questions. First is, could you just go back to the slide where you listed all the steps again of the current UX? Yeah, this one.
Am I missing something?
No. That's it. I just wanted to take a photo of this. I didn't.
Sure.
And then second one was, how do you select the DEX in your routing? Like you mentioned Uniswap, but like, what if like there's a cheaper DEX, or do you like operate similarly to Matcha?
Yeah, so it is aggregating through 1inch to begin with. We'll support other aggregators in the future. Okay. So hopefully 1inch is picking the cheapest option. But as a catalog relay is developed, there'll be more aggregators that we support.
Okay, because like I've heard CowSwap was the cheapest, for example.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, man.
Is there any other question? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.